Charter of King Milutin to Kareia in 1318. In the archive of the Hilandar monastery, the Charter of King Milutin, issued to the Kareia cell of Saint Sava, with the date 6826. It was written on parchment, a semi-constitution of the 14th century. The king's signature is in red ink and has a gold seal. This charter is very interesting both in its content and from the point of view of Serbian diplomacy. It begins with quotes from the Gospels that speak of the need to renounce this world and moves on to the feet of Saint Sava. Abandoning his parents, coming to Mount Athos, establishing Hilandar and hermit life in Kareia, where he built the church of Saint Sava the Hermit, having written the constitution for this cell. Then King Milutin tells how he was informed about that hermit's cell which he loved very much, for the sake of the name of my Lord and Father Saint Sava. Then, the charter says that Milutin supplied the cell with books, icons and all necessities, because the abbot Nicodemus and the Kareia elder Theodulos begged him to establish the cell. This information about the need to establish a cell will agree with the information about the then situation on Mount Athos. At the beginning of the 14th century, Mount Athos suffered terrible devastation by the Catalan Company, a mercenary army of Spanish adventurers who, under the leadership of Roger de Flor, fought in 1304 with the Byzantines against the Turks. But in 1305, they captured Gallipoli and began to ravage Trachea. In 1307, they moved to Macedonia and established themselves near Thessaloniki and the Cassandra Peninsula, from where they ravaged the surrounding areas for 3 years and attacked Mount Athos several times. The hardships that the Hilandar monastery suffered from these robbers at that time, and the heroic fight that the brave abbot Danilo led against them and which is so dramatically depicted in his life, are well known. Danilo life describes in detail the 2 Catalan attacks on Hilandar and the siege of the Russian monastery, where Danilo took refuge from them, but also mentions the troubles suffered by the entire Holy Mountain. They conquered and came with their forces to Mount Athos, and having surrounded it, they looted all the riches gathered in it, and almost robbed it all. Abbot Danilo then had to spend 3 years and 3 months in a purga in one place, suffering from care and poverty. And it seems to me, beloved, that the wars and fears of that time are similar to the suffering of Jerusalem, which it suffered from Titus Caesar of Rome. Yes, when he came to Jerusalem, every soul of that city fell under the edge of the sword and the other evil causes of misery. Yep, people chewed their belts and shoes, and others touched the most disgusting things. Yes, such horror could be seen back then, when Mount Athos was desolated by the enemy. Yea, these ungodly nations, the Frisians, Turks, Tatars, Mogavars and Catalans, and other numerous nations, having then come to the Holy Mountain, set many on fire and looted all their collected wealth and took the captives into slavery. And the rest of their remains perished from the worst death, hunger. There was no one to bury them, but the beasts and birds of the sky fed on their bodies. I quoted the entire quote that talks about the Catalan looting all over Mount Athos, but from it you will see that in such circumstances it was difficult to remain undamaged in any monastery of Mount Athos. It is very likely that the Kareia cell was also damaged on that occasion, since Kareia as a settlement was never fortified by walls. The reason for the devastation is that the Catalans had to pass right by Kareia when they were going from Hilandar in 1309 towards the Russian monastery, present-day Stari Rusic, where Abbot Danilo was hiding. Then the robbers burned all the buildings of Panteleimon Monastery except for the big pyre, and on that occasion all the monastery's documents were destroyed in the fire. That is why the Russian monastery received a chrysophilia from Emperor Andronikos II 2 years after that in compensation for the lost charters. So it was stated there that the Russian monks made use of the intervention of the Serbian king Milutin. It is obvious that this intervention of the Serbian king for the Russian monastery represented gratitude for the support that the family of Saint Panteleimon provided to the future Serbian archbishop and Milutin's most faithful friend. Therefore, the Kareia cell suffered during the Catalan invasion, and the need to establish the cell forced the old man Teodula together with the abbot Nicodeme to come to the Serbian king for help. If one were to wonder why the monastery waited 6 years to address the king, it could be assumed that at that time the monastery devoted its first concern to the establishment of Hilandar itself and its fortifications on the sea, and that only after that could it dedicate itself to the establishment of Kareia. Another Hilandar Act has been preserved that directly and undoubtedly confirms the authenticity of Milutin's charter in 1318. It is an act of Abbot Gervasier dated June 16, 1332, Indict 15th, with content similar to Milutin's charter. In that act, the abbot says that King Dušan, at the request of Abbot Gervasier, made the same gift as King Milutin to the Kareia. This act was, therefore, made for the monastery, as Dušan's original decision was supposed to be delivered to the elder of the Kareia cell. King Milutin's gift of 2 mertikas given by Hilandar to the cell for 1,000 golden purpers that Milutin donated for the support of the cells is mentioned here in 2 places. Therefore, this Milutin charter to the Kareia belongs to the ranks of distinguished Serbian royal acts, Vladimir Motion states in 1938.